Why was Captain Bridger's attention drawn to her, the quiet one, the one who didn't belong? The desert heat shimmered over the tarmac like liquid glass, turning everything into a mirage. New arrivals stepped off the transport vehicle in staggered formation, boots thudding softly against the cracked asphalt. Among them was Corporal, smaller than most, moving with a kind of precise calm that didn't fit the chaos of a special warfare training base. Her brown hair was tied back in a no-nonsense knot, her uniform immaculate, her eyes unreadable. She looked like she was trying to disappear, and somehow that only made her stand out more. Captain Bridger watched her from 30 yards away, arms crossed, the sun cutting harsh lines across his weathered face. Years of combat deployments had given him the kind of gaze that could strip lies from truth. Most recruits wilted under it. This one didn't. She just existed there, silent, unremarkable, but something about that made his instincts prickle. He'd learned never to ignore that feeling. Every legend he'd ever met started quiet. "Formation, move," barked the sergeant in charge, and the group snapped to attention, rows forming against the backdrop of desert glare and chain-link fences. Stood in the third row, posture perfect, eyes forward. Around her, the others exchanged quick, assessing glances. This was where reputations began or ended. 2 rows ahead stood Sergeant Trent, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind of man who had already decided who was worth his respect. When his eyes flicked back toward, his expression said everything. She won't last a week. The briefing started, dry words about schedules, safety, and expectations, but barely heard them. The heat, the smell of oil and dust, the murmur of restless soldiers, it all blurred. What she did hear, faint and sharp, was the tone of mockery already forming around her, the unspoken test of being the weak link. She didn't react. She never did. She had practice with silence. When the formation broke, the trainees fanned out orientation packets, equipment issue, the endless bureaucracy of military life. But when stepped into the armory, something subtle shifted. Under fluorescent light, racks of rifles lined the walls, M4 carbines, M9 pistols, standard gear for those still earning their place. But in the far corner, behind reinforced glass, stood a row of monsters, .50 caliber rifles. Each one a masterpiece of engineering and power, capable of killing a target over a mile away. Their long, dark silhouettes seemed almost alive. She stopped there. Her eyes lingered on one rifle longer than they should have. Her fingers twitched faintly at her side, as if they remembered a weight, a recoil, a rhythm. Then she caught herself, forced her gaze away. Behind the counter, Chief Warrant Officer Helena Strand was watching her. Sharp eyes, sharper intuition. Strand noticed the hesitation, the quiet kind that spoke of recognition, not curiosity. But she said nothing, just logged issued weapon, a standard M4, and handed it over. "Sign here," she said. "Yes, ma'am," replied, her voice soft but steady. Outside, the desert wind stirred, whispering across the range where echoes of gunfire carried like ghosts. That night in the mess hall, laughter and stories filled the air, the sound of camaraderie and competition in equal measure. Held court at the center of it, retelling deployment stories like war ballads. The room listened because confidence was contagious. Sat alone at the far end of a long table, eating methodically, eyes on her tray. No one joined her. No one even pretended to. "Admin girl," someone muttered. "Bet she got here on a quota." A ripple of quiet laughter followed. Didn't react except for the faint tightening of her jaw. That was the only sign. Years ago, she'd learned how to turn emotion into discipline. Every insult was a brick, every doubt a wall. Then, as if on cue, the mess hall went silent. Captain Bridger had entered. He didn't need to speak. His presence rearranged the air. His eyes swept the room, everything, the group dynamics, the posturing, the silence at the edges. And there she was again, sitting alone, posture straight, eyes down. The easy assumption would have been timidity, but what Bridger saw instead was restraint, controlled silence. He made a mental note, watch her. The next morning began before dawn. The desert was still cold, sky bruised with purple light. The recruits assembled in formation, breath visible in the chill. Lieutenant Commander Kensington addressed them in clipped, efficient sentences. "This week is about separation," he said. "The capable from the competent from the unfit." And so it began, runs, drills, obstacle courses designed not just to test endurance, but to strip away ego. When's turn came on the obstacle course, no one expected much. She wasn't built like a sprinter or a brawler. Completed the course in under 4 minutes, his movements efficient, effortless. His team cheered. When started, the laughter had already begun. She climbed the first wall slowly, arms trembling but didn't stop. The rope climb tore at her palms. She slipped once, twice, gritting her teeth until she reached the top. Mud pits swallowed her boots. The barbed wire shredded her sleeves. She finished in 6 minutes and 40 seconds, almost 3 minutes behind the leaders. And when she crossed the finish line, no one clapped. But she never stopped moving, never paused to gasp or lean on her knees. She just straightened her posture and stood there, chest rising steadily, waiting for the next command. From the sidelines, Master Chief watched quietly. 30 years in the Navy had taught him what to look for, and it wasn't speed. It was will. He'd seen recruits who broke after 30 seconds of failure. This one finished, silent, eyes unbroken. That meant something. Later that afternoon came weapons familiarization, the indoor range, thick with the smell of cordite and oil. Bridger stood at the back, arms folded, watching as Kensington explained firing protocols. Recruits lined up, each taking turns. Handled her M4 cleanly, field stripped it within regulation time, reassembled it without error. Her form was by the book, her shots centered, respectable, not remarkable. But Bridger noticed something others didn't. Her movements were too efficient, not cautious like a beginner, not fluid like a show-off's. They were practiced. A routine performed so many times it had become muscle memory, the kind of precision that came from thousands of repetitions. Yet her demeanor stayed quiet, unassuming. If he hadn't been watching, he might missed it entirely. That night the mess hall was louder than usual. Trainees were bonding, hierarchies forming through stories and laughter. His voice carried easily, commanding the room's attention again. Nearby, sat alone as always, a small notebook open beside her tray. She ate with one hand, wrote with the other, precise lines, diagrams, small notations. From across the room, Bridger saw the page. Calculations, wind-drift equations, ballistic arcs. Nothing that belonged in basic training. He approached her table. "Studying already, Corporal?" he asked. She looked up, not startled, just aware. "Just reviewing, sir, making sure I understand the fundamentals." He nodded, studying her face. "You handle a rifle like you've done more than fundamentals." For a heartbeat, her mask slipped. A flicker, recognition, memory, then gone. "I had good instructors, sir," she said softly. Across the room, laughter rose again. "Some people just aren't cut out for this," he said loudly. "But that's okay, admin needs good people too." Laughter rippled through the room like a current. Didn't flinch. She just turned a page in her notebook. Bridger's gaze lingered. Something about this woman wasn't adding up. She had the posture of someone trying to appear smaller, and the composure of someone who'd seen things that changed her forever. He didn't know which truth was real yet, but he knew one thing: no one hides that well unless they've had practice. The following days were relentless, 5-mile runs, tactical drills, sand and sun breaking the week apart. Struggled visibly but always finished. Never complained. Never asked for help. Began marking notes in her file, quiet observations, never quits, controlled breathing, understates skill. Meanwhile thrived. His charm made him the unofficial leader. He wasn't cruel, not exactly. His mockery came wrapped in humor, the kind that stung worse because it sounded like concern. "I just worry about her in a real situation," he said one morning. "You can't carry dead weight in combat." His followers nodded, a few even laughed. and from across the range heard every word. That evening, when others were gone, she stayed behind in the armory cleaning bay, field stripping her rifle under the harsh white light. Appeared beside her, silent for a moment, then spoke. "You shoot like someone trying not to stand out," he said. Her hands paused just briefly, then resumed cleaning, "just following the fundamentals, Master Chief." He grunted. "Fundamentals don't explain breathing patterns calibrated for extreme range." Her eyes flicked up, calm but unreadable. "Maybe I had a good instructor." Stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe, but remember, everything comes out eventually. Usually does." She gave no response, only reassembled the weapon, checked the action, and locked it away. When she left, her footsteps echoed alone through the corridor, steady, deliberate. That night, her small barracks room was lit by the glow of a single desk lamp. Books were spread across the surface: advanced ballistics, atmospheric effects on trajectory, wind reading, and mirage theory. Not standard issue, not for this phase of training. Worked through pages of calculations like a ritual, each number written with precision. Outside, the desert stars burned cold and clear, the kind of night where a skilled shooter could see for miles. She looked up once, eyes distant, as if remembering a place far from here. Her hand brushed a photograph folded inside her notebook, an image of herself in another uniform, holding a rifle that didn't exist in standard inventory, eyes colder, sharper. She looked at it for a long moment, then closed the notebook. Sleep came easily to her, the kind of easy that comes from exhaustion and ghosts. And across the base, Captain Bridger sat in his office, still thinking about her. He couldn't explain why, only that something about Corporal felt wrong. Not wrong like unqualified, wrong like classified. He poured himself another coffee, eyes scanning her personnel file, half of it redacted, names blacked out, locations removed. 2 years of service unaccounted for. No records, no deployments. Just silence. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the fences again, carrying a question across the stillness of night. What kind of soldier hides in plain sight? Why did she hesitate when she heard the word? The sun was merciless again, bleeding gold across the sand when the announcement came. The recruits stood in mourning formation, sweat already forming beneath their collars. Lieutenant Commander Kensington's voice carried over the range. "Advanced weapons qualification begins next week. For those eligible, you'll have a chance to train on specialized systems. The M240, the Mark 19, and..." He paused, letting the tension build. "The M82A1 long-range rifle." A murmur rippled through the formation: excitement, nerves, ambition. The wasn't just a weapon, it was legend. The kind of rifle whispered about in stories told over beers and campfires. Firing one was an honor, qualifying with one meant prestige. Captain Bridger stepped forward, his voice cutting clean through the noise. "This qualification is voluntary. It's not a competition, it's a test of precision, patience, and physics. Those who think they can handle it, submit your names to Master Chief by 700. Dismissed." The crowd broke immediately into pockets of conversation. Plans, boasts, laughter. Was already surrounded, his confidence radiating. "Been waiting for this," he said. "This is where you separate the shooters from the storytellers." Blackwood nodded eagerly. "You think anyone else has a chance?" "Not a real one," he replied, glancing briefly toward. "Some people are built for this. Some people are." The way he said it wasn't cruel, it was worse. It was final. Stood alone again, helmet under her arm, expression neutral. She didn't look toward them, didn't react at all. But something flickered behind her stillness. The faintest shift of breath, the quiet calculation of someone making a decision they already knew would change everything. She turned and walked toward the administration building. Was at his desk, tapping through digital files when she appeared in the doorway. He didn't look surprised. "Corporal," he said, "let me guess." "I'd like to submit my name for the long-range qualification, Master Chief," she said, calm, measured, certain. He studied her for a moment, the kind of stare that saw beyond the uniform. "You understand what that means. This isn't a hobby range. The isn't forgiving. It punishes mistakes." "I understand, sir." "Your scores so far have been adequate," he said. "What makes you think you're ready for this level?" Met his gaze evenly. "I'd like the opportunity to find out." Her tone wasn't defiant. It was quiet conviction, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of. Nodded slowly, signing her name onto the list. "Qualification starts Monday at 600. You've got the weekend to study ballistics tables. You'll need them." "I will, sir," she said. And then came the footsteps, loud, confident, careless. Entered with his usual entourage, Blackwood and Hightower right behind him. They froze when they saw standing there. He smirked. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I'm submitting for the long-range qualification," she said evenly. The air seemed to tighten around the words. Chuckled, shaking his head. "That's ambitious. The isn't exactly beginner-friendly." "I'm aware, Sergeant." He took a step closer, lowering his tone as if trying to save her from herself. "Look, I'm just being honest. That rifle kicks like a truck. You flinch once and you'll leave with a dislocated shoulder. It's not about ego, it's physics." "I appreciate the warning," she said, "but I'll take my chances." Blackwood's voice came softer, almost kind. "Maybe work your way up to it. There's no shame in starting small." "The fundamentals are important," agreed. "That's why I learned them." The silence after that felt like the edge of a blade. Exhaled sharply, flashing a humorless smile. "Your funeral. Just don't expect the rest of us to slow down when you can't keep up." He submitted his name with a confident tap on the tablet. His companions followed, and when they left, leaned back in his chair, watching. "You know what you just signed up for," he said. "Yes, Master Chief." "Good," he replied, "because most don't." Outside, the sun had begun to fall. The bass shifted into its slower rhythm, hum of generators, distant drills, laughter fatting with the heat. But in her small quarters, sat at her desk again, surrounded by notebooks, firing tables, and technical manuals. Lines of equations filled the pages: air density, drag coefficient, deviation. The mathematics of death disguised as precision. She wasn't studying, she was remembering. Her hands moved over the numbers like someone tracing a familiar map, one she hadn't walked in years. Saturday came, and with it speculation. The mess hall buzzed with talk of Monday's test. Bets were being placed not if would qualify but how easily. Blackwood was the popular favorite for second place. Hightower, a respectable third. No one mentioned. When her name did surface, people changed the subject, voices lowering, as if failure were contagious. Seated on the edge of his table, stayed quiet. He'd watched longer than the others, had seen how she moved when she thought no one was looking. The calmness wasn't timidity, it was focus. He couldn't explain it, but the numbers didn't add up, the way her breathing matched recoil rhythm, how her gaze lingered on the range like it was home. Still, doubt was easier, so he said nothing. That night under the desert sky, checked her rifle again, the same M4 she'd trained with, the one that had become her disguise. She moved with care, cleaning each piece, her fingers tracing metal that wasn't the rifle she missed. When she was done, she reached for her notebook. Inside, tucked in the back, was that same photograph. A younger her, different insignia, a different look in her eyes. A look of someone who already knew what perfection meant, and the cost it demanded. She stared at it for a long moment, the desert silence pressing in around her, then folded it carefully and slipped it away. Tomorrow would be her last quiet night. By Sunday morning, Bridger was already at the range. The place was a cathedral of steel and sand, 10 rifles laid out like relics under the early light, moved between them, running final checks. The air smelled of oil and dust, the temperature rising by the minute. "What's your read?" Bridger asked quietly, eyes scanning the list of candidates. Didn't answer immediately. He was adjusting a scope mount, his hands steady. "I think she's been holding back," he said finally. Bridger frowned. "Holding back or hiding?" "Same thing sometimes," replied. "Question is why?" Bridger's jaw tightened. He'd seen her file. Half of it was classified, 2 years missing, redactions where duty stations should been. "Command sent her here for a reason," he murmured. "But I don't like incomplete pictures." Nodded toward the targets being placed far downrange, small black silhouettes against the desert horizon. "You know the current record." 3,448 meters, Bridger said. "Canadian Special Forces 2017. Nobody's topped it." "Most don't even try past 1,800, said. "Past that, you're fighting the planet." Bridger's eyes narrowed. "And yet she's signing up for this." "She didn't sign up to learn," said, almost to himself. "She signed up to stop pretending." That evening, while ran one last study session, his voice booming, his audience rapt, sat alone in her room, disassembling and reassembling her weapon without looking down. The sound of metal against metal echoed softly in the dim light. Outside, the base was alive with energy. Laughter, competition, confidence, but her space remained silent. She placed the rifle aside and looked again at the photograph. Her hand lingered on it, thumb brushing the worn edges. She remembered that day, the dust storm, the heat, the sound that didn't come from any training ground. And then she whispered something, so quietly that even she could barely hear it. "Not this time." She slid the photo back into the notebook and blew out the light. Monday morning dawned cold, clean, and impossibly still. The desert stretched endless and golden as the recruits assembled at the long-range qualification range. The air was dry, the kind that sharpens sound. 10 rifles gleamed beneath the sun, each one massive and deliberate. His voice broke the silence. 3 phases, 800, 1,800, and 2,500 meters. Fail any phase, you're out. Safety first, precision second. This isn't about pride, it's about physics. Took Station 1, prime position. Was assigned to Station 7 near the far end, distant, almost forgotten, but Bridger was watching her, closely now. As the line prepared, something changed. When approached her rifle, her posture shifted, small details, subtle but unmistakable. The way her shoulders squared, the way her hands found familiar places on the weapon, the way her breathing slowed. She wasn't approaching it like a student. She was coming home. Her fingers ran across this receiver with delicate certainty, checking the barrel, action, scope, bipod movements too fluid, too rehearsed. Noticed immediately, brow furrowing. "That's not familiarization," he muttered. "That's memory." Bridger, beside him, nodded. "And she's not even trying to hide it anymore." Noticed, too. His smirk faltered for the first time. "She's just showing off," he muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced. Phase 1, 800 meters, 3 shots begin. Went first, confident, steady, textbook. 3 rounds, 6-inch grouping. Qualified. Applause followed, casual but approving. Then came stations 2 through 6. Each candidate fought recoil, adjusted clumsily, struggled against nerves. 2 were disqualified immediately. Station 7 called Corporal. She stepped forward, calm as stone, laid behind the rifle like she'd been doing it her entire life. Her cheek found the stock, eyes aligning with the scope. The world narrowed, wind, breath, heartbeat. She fired. The recoil thundered, but the rifle barely moved. Through his binoculars, watched the hit marker flash. Center, dead center. A murmur rippled down the line. She chambered another round, waited one breath, fired again. Another perfect hit. The third followed, 3 for 3, tight grouping, 2 inches apart, unheard of for a first-time shooter. Froze mid-reload, disbelief written all over him. "That was luck," he said softly, as if trying to convince himself. Bridger lowered his binoculars slowly. the faintest of smiles tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Luck," he murmured, "doesn't reload that smooth." Looked down at his tablet, jaw tightening. The numbers didn't lie. She wasn't proving herself. She was revealing herself. And somewhere deep inside, both men knew this was just the beginning. Why was the air suddenly heavy, as if everyone knew they'd just seen something they weren't supposed to? The range was silent except for the slow crackle of heat rising off the desert. 10 rifles, 10 shooters, but only one had made the impossible look effortless. Corporal cleared her weapon, stood up, and waited. Her expression was the same as always, neutral, almost bored, but nothing about her was ordinary anymore. His voice broke the tension. "Phase 1 complete, 2 disqualified, the rest will advance." Barely heard him. He was still staring at, his mind trying to rewrite what he'd seen. Wind was calmer at her end, he muttered to Blackwood. She got lucky. Blackwood didn't answer. She'd seen the way handled the rhythm of her breathing, the stillness before each shot. That wasn't luck. That was mastery. Bridger from the observation platform folded his arms. The muscle in his jaw flexed. "That wasn't the first time she's fired one of those," he said quietly. Kensington glanced up from his clipboard. "You think she's hiding prior training?" "I think she's hiding something bigger than that," Bridger replied. "Find out everything we've missed." Called for the next phase. "Reset the targets. 1,800 meters, 5 shots. You must place 4 in the zone to qualify." At that distance, the horizon shimmered. The air itself distorted the view like looking through water. Even seasoned marksmen failed here. It was the point where mathematics met instinct, where theory stopped helping and muscle memory took over. Lay prone behind his, the weight of expectation pressed on him. He'd led this class from day one, but now all eyes were watching her. He would not lose to a corporal who could barely finish an obstacle course. He steadied his breathing, squeezed the trigger. The first shot landed 6 inches low. He adjusted, second shot too high. By the 5th, he'd salvaged 4 hits, technically qualified but sloppy, not the kind of performance that drew applause. "Qualified," announced, expression unreadable. One by one, the others took their turns. 2 failed to hit even half their targets. The range fell quieter with each missed shot, then called, "Station 7, begin." She didn't answer, didn't nod, just lowered herself behind the rifle and became part of it. Her breathing slowed, body settling into that perfect alignment, shoulder, spine, weapon, earth. Through the scope, the world disappeared into math and mirage. She fired once, the echo rolled away. Center mass. Again another hit. Then 3 more, perfectly spaced, as if drawn with a compass. When measured the grouping, his fingers paused on the screen. 4 inches total, he murmured, at 1,800 meters. He looked up slowly. The entire range had stopped moving. Was staring openly now, jaw clenched. "That's not possible," he said under his breath. "Nobody shoots like that without years of practice." Standing nearby, spoke quietly. "Maybe she's had years of practice." Bridger descended from the observation deck, his boots crunching across the gravel until he reached. "That wasn't just skill," he said. "That was memory. That was repetition." Nodded. "Her file says infantry, standard pipeline. No sniper training." Bridger's eyes hardened. "Then the file's a lie." On the line was reloading, calm as a heartbeat. The wind tugged at her hair, but she didn't seem to notice. Whatever tension filled the air around her didn't touch her at all. She was somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere older. 15 minutes later, raised his voice again. "Final phase, 2,500 meters." The words hung there. Every shooter knew what that meant. That distance wasn't marksmanship, it was faith. "You will fire 3 rounds. 2 must impact the target zone to pass. Account for wind drift, spin drift, and atmospheric pressure. You'll be firing at the edge of effective range. If you don't know the math, pray. He gave them 15 minutes to recalibrate. In that time, whispers spread across the range like electricity. Did you see her grouping? She's sandbagging. She has to be prior service SOF. Then why's she here? Stood off to the side, packing. The confidence that had once wrapped around him like armor was cracking. He'd built his whole identity on being the best, and now that identity was bleeding out on the sand. Blackwood approached, voice low. Maybe she had prior sniper training. Then why hide it, he snapped. Because she was told to, said, joining them. You ever think of that? The idea hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable, because it made too much sense. Up on the observation platform, Bridger and Kensington reviewed what little they could find. Her service record flickered on the tablet, page after page of redactions. Sir, Kensington said, lowering his voice, there's a 2-year gap, completely blacked out, no duty station, no deployment, and the authorization level on those redactions, it's higher than ours. Bridger exhaled slowly. That level of clearance only applies to black operations or intelligence units. Then she's not supposed to exist, Kensington said. Not officially, Bridger murmured. He looked back toward the range, where stood motionless beside her weapon. But she's about to remind everyone that she does. His voice called them back to their stations. Final phase, 2,500 meters. Let's see who's got the patience to meet physics halfway. Went first. He was breathing too hard, overthinking. His first round went long, kicking dust behind the target. The second dropped short. The third grazed the edge. 1 hit out of 3, not enough. Disqualified, said flatly. The sound of the word felt like a verdict. Blackwood stepped up. She was steadier but tense. First round high, second good, third wide. 1 of 3, disqualified. The next 2 shooters followed. One qualified by a thread, the other missed all 3. Then came Station 7. She walked to her rifle like it was a continuation of her own body. No hurry, no hesitation, just inevitability. When she settled behind it, the atmosphere changed. Even the wind seemed to pause. The sun was climbing, heat waves twisting the air. The mirage danced between her and the distant target, a black silhouette almost invisible against the horizon. She watched the movement of the air, the flicker of flags half a mile away, and adjusted 1 click left, half a mil high. Her breathing slowed, 4 seconds inhale, 6 seconds exhale. Then nothing, no sound, no movement. The rifle spoke. This report was thunder itself, rolling off the desert floor. Tracked the vapor trail through his spotting scope, watching it arc across impossible distance. 2 seconds, 3, then the target flared. Dead center. A ripple of disbelief went through the spectators. She cycled the bolt, chambered another round, and fired again. Another perfect impact, inches from the first. By now, no one was speaking. Even Bridger forgot to breathe. Chambered her third round, realigned her scope, and pulled the trigger with the calm inevitability of a clock ticking down. 3 shots. 3 hits. Each within inches. 2,500 meters. Looked up from his tablet, his weathered face unreadable. Top 5% in the entire force, he said quietly. Then louder, Station 7 qualified, perfect score. No one clapped. No one moved. The silence was reverent, the kind of silence reserved for things you don't yet understand. Stood frozen. His mouth open, but no words came. The world had tilted, and he didn't know how to stand on it anymore. Bridger walked toward them, boots crunching on the gravel, expression carved from stone. Master Chief, he said, hold that question. Stopped mid-sentence, realizing what Bridger meant. The captain faced directly. Corporal, your record contains classified gaps and inconsistencies. You've just demonstrated skills that require years of elite-level training. Explain where you learned to shoot like that. The range was silent again. But this time it was waiting. Stood at attention, eyes steady. She had known this moment would come. "Sir, I need to request a private conversation. Some of what I can tell you is classified above this setting's authorization level." Bridger's gaze hardened. "Start with what isn't classified. How long have you been shooting like this?" She exhaled, slow, deliberate. 8 years, sir, give or take." A low ripple moved through the crowd. 8 years. That meant she'd been operating long before this training cycle, long before most of them had even qualified for deployment. "And the 2-year gap in your file," Bridger pressed. She met his eyes. "Classified operations, sir. Joint task force. Precision targeting in areas." Bridger processed that. Redacted records, ballistic mastery, the way she'd hidden it all. It clicked together with cold clarity. "You were a sniper," he said. "A Black Ops marksman." His reply was quiet, almost respectful. "I was a precision shooter assigned to operations requiring extreme-range engagement, sir." "How far?" asked, unable to stop himself. She hesitated for the first time, then answered simply, 5,000 meters, confirmed kill, combat conditions." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't disbelief anymore. It was awe. Found his voice strangled and raw. "That's impossible. The record's 3,400. You can't." "I'm not claiming it," said softly. "I'm stating it. The operation was classified, but it happened." Bridger stepped closer, voice low. "Then why are you here, Corporal? Why pretend to be average?" Her jaw flexed, emotion finally flickering through her composure. "Because I was burned, sir. My identity compromised. The task force disbanded. I was reassigned into standard channels to maintain operational security. My orders were to keep a low profile until clearance review." Bridger absorbed every word, the pieces locking into place. "And now?" "Now I've been cleared to resume standard operations," she said. "But staying invisible isn't an option anymore." He nodded once, sharp. "You'll debrief in my office within the hour, everything you're authorized to share." Then he turned to the others, voice raised, command hard. "Everything witnessed here is classified. No discussion, no speculation. You will not speak of Corporal's performance without my authorization. Is that understood?" A unified "Yes, sir," answered back. As they began to disperse, stayed where he was, staring at the woman he'd mocked for weeks. She looked back at him, no pride, no triumph, just calm professionalism. The kind of quiet that came after truth had finally stepped into daylight. He swallowed hard. "You really made that shot?" Her gaze softened. "Helmand Province," she said. "Target was coordinating attacks on coalition convoys. Compound 2 fortified for direct assault. I took the shot from 5,000 meters. Wind, humidity, curvature, flight time 47 seconds. 1 round. 1 kill." The words weren't boastful. They were a statement of record. The math of death turned into memory. Standing nearby, exhaled like a man witnessing a miracle. 30 years in this field," he said quietly. "Never seen anything like that." Nodded once. "Neither have I, sir, and I hope I never have to again." That night, Bridger's office light burned late. The debrief lasted 3 hours. By the time left, the desert had gone quiet again. But across the base, the legend had already started moving, whispered between bunks, passed along in low voices. The corporal who wasn't supposed to exist. The one who hit 5,000 meters. And out on the empty range, where the wind carried only silence, the faint scent of gunpowder still hung in the air, a reminder that every secret eventually finds its mark. Why did silence feel heavier after the truth came out? The base slept uneasily that night. Conversations whispered in corridors, names passed through the dark. 5,000 meters. Men who had once laughed now spoke her name like it was myth. And yet in her quarters sat alone, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, no pride. Just the quiet ache of someone who had spent years hiding a truth that never stopped following her. A soft knock broke the stillness. "Enter," she said. Captain Bridger stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't speak at first, just studied her. No rank, no ceremony. Just two soldiers who'd both seen too much of what the world calls necessary. "You didn't have to tell them," he said finally. She gave a faint, tired smile. They would find out eventually. He nodded. "Maybe, but not like that." "I wasn't showing off, sir." "I know." He paused, leaning against the desk. "You were remembering." That made her look up. "Yes," she said softly, "and remembering hurts." Bridger exhaled, crossing his arms. "The shot, Helmand Province, was that real?" "Yes, sir." He hesitated. "Was it worth it?" Her answer came slowly. "For the men it saved, yes. For the person it made me, I don't know." The captain nodded, expression unreadable. "Command confirmed your background this afternoon. You weren't just Black Ops, were you?" "No, sir," she said quietly. "I was Tier 1 assignment, Special Activities Division, Counterinsurgency Precision Group." He let that sink in. Tier 1, the kind of unit even operators didn't talk about. "So why reassign you here to basic training?" She looked at her hands. "They called it reintegration. I call it penance." Bridger frowned. "For what?" "For the mission that made me a ghost," she said. "The shot was successful, but the extraction was. My spotter didn't make it out." Her voice broke slightly on the last word, but she steadied herself. "They said it wasn't my fault, but it was my trigger pull that started everything." Bridger didn't reply immediately. He knew there were no right words. Finally he said, "And you stayed silent all this time?" "Yes, sir. Orders were clear. I was to blend in, maintain cover until declassification." He nodded slowly. "You did more than blend in. You made yourself disappear." She gave a small shrug. "It was easier than explaining." Bridger stepped closer. "Listen, what you did out there today, it matters. Not just the skill, the restraint, the composure. These recruits need that kind of quiet strength. I want you to stay here as an instructor." Her eyes lifted. "Sir, with respect, I didn't come here to teach." "I'm not asking you to teach," he said. "I'm asking you to lead." Something in his tone made her pause. He continued, "They look up to people like because loud confidence is easier to believe in. But when they saw you today, calm, deliberate, impossible, they saw what real strength looks like. You've got nothing to prove, and that's exactly what they need to see." She was quiet for a long moment. "And if I say no?" He smiled faintly. "Then I'll reassign you anyway." That drew the smallest hint of laughter from her, the first in days. "Yes, sir." "Get some rest. You start tomorrow." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I've seen legends. You don't shoot like that by chance. You shoot like someone who's still fighting a ghost." She didn't answer. And when the door closed, the silence returned, heavier than before. Morning came with the sting of wind and sand. The recruits assembled for marksmanship review, expecting the same rotation of drills and lectures. Instead, they found Captain Bridger waiting beside the range with 2 cases of rifles and a single chair. Behind him stood calm, quiet, her hair tied back, expression unreadable. "Morning," Bridger said. "Today's instructor is Corporal." A wave of murmurs rippled through the ranks. Stiffened, jaw tight, Blackwood and exchanged uncertain glances. Bridger continued, "Some of you saw her work yesterday. The rest of you heard about it. She's here to make sure what you think you know about marksmanship gets burned out of your systems. You'll listen. You'll learn. And if you're smart, you'll shut up." Then he looked too. "Corporal, they're yours." She nodded once. "Yes, sir." He stepped back, folding his arms. For a moment no one moved, then stepped forward, her boots crunching softly in the sand. "When I say prone," she said evenly, "you go prone. When I say breathe, you breathe. When I say fire, you don't think, you just know. That's the difference between shooters and survivors. Her tone wasn't commanding, it was precise. Most of you think pulling a trigger makes you a marksman, she continued. It doesn't, it makes you a noise. That earned a few smirks, muttered something under his breath. Turned her head slightly. You want to repeat that, Sergeant? He met her gaze, but only for a second. No, ma'am. Good, she said, because this isn't about ego, it's about control, the kind you don't learn from manuals. She picked up a rifle, the glinting in the morning light. Wind, distance, rotation, they all matter, but so does emotion. If you can't control what's inside you, you can't control where the round lands. Every bullet carries your state of mind. That's why calm matters. Her words hit harder than anyone expected. They weren't lessons, they were confessions. Found himself listening more intently than he'd meant to. Even smirk faded. Now, said quietly, watch. She dropped into prone position. The world seemed to narrow again, the same eerie stillness from before. She fired one round, then another, then another. 3 shots. One hole. Watching from a distance, shook his head. Still can't believe it, he muttered. Bridger's response was simple. Believe it, that's discipline. The next few days changed everything. Word spread across the base. The sniper who didn't miss, the one they'd ignored, underestimated, and whispered about, was now teaching the next generation. Her lessons weren't about glory. They were about restraint, patience, control. When you hold a rifle, she told them one afternoon, you hold more than metal, you hold consequence. Every shot has a story attached to it. Some stay with you forever. And when she said that, her voice softened just slightly, just enough for Bridger, standing in the back, to understand what she meant. His transformation came slower. Pride dies hard. But during one training cycle, when he missed a wind call and cursed under his breath, knelt beside him. Stop fighting it, she said. You can't bully precision, you have to earn it. He looked at her, at the calm, unshakable steadiness in her eyes, and realized for the first time that she wasn't his competition. She was what he wanted to become. After that, he started listening. By the end of the week, Bridger called her in again. Sit, he said, handing her a coffee. She did. He smiled faintly. You've managed what most instructors can't. Apologized to Blackwood, said morale's up. Even Kensington admitted he was wrong about you, which, frankly, is a miracle. Almost smiled. I just reminded them what the job really means. Bridger studied her for a moment. And what does it mean to you? Her eyes dropped to the cup in her hands. It means knowing when not to pull the trigger. That answer hit him deeper than he expected. You ever think about going back, the field? She shook her head slowly. I used to think that's where I belonged. Now I think maybe I was meant to teach people not to become what I had to be. He nodded, understanding more than he said. Outside, the range echoed with distant gunfire. Rhythm, repetition, purpose. That evening, while others relaxed in the mess hall, approached her table. For a moment she thought he'd come to gloat again, but his expression was different, unsure, humbled. Corporal, he said, can I ask you something? She nodded. That 5,000-meter shot, he hesitated. How did you know it would hit? She looked at him for a long moment. I didn't, she said softly. I just knew I couldn't afford to miss. He swallowed hard, nodded, and walked away without another word. Watched him go, the proud sergeant finally quiet, and for the first time since her reassignment, she felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe this was what redemption looked like. Not medals, not records, just the moment when arrogance gives way to respect. Later that night, Bridger stood at the range alone. The wind was cold, the stars sharp. He found her there, lying prone behind the, not firing, just staring through the scope into the dark. Can't sleep, he asked. She didn't look up, just checking if I still can. He walked closer. Still what? Still see clearly. He followed her gaze, endless sand, no targets, just distance. "You can't shoot ghosts," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "I can try." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and oil. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Bridger said, "You know, most people spend their lives trying to prove they're something they're not. You spent yours proving you're nothing special when you're the best I've ever seen." She exhaled slowly. "Being the best doesn't mean being proud of it." "No," he said. "It means carrying the weight of what others can't." She turned toward him, eyes soft under the starlight. "Maybe, but sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." Why did the desert feel different the morning the call came in? It started like any other day, rifles being cleaned, recruits moving through drills, the dull rhythm of order. But something in the air felt wrong. The kind of stillness that usually comes right before the world asks too much of you again. Was at the range, reviewing wind calls, when a comms runner appeared breathless. "Captain Bridger's office, ma'am. Priority summons." She nodded, set the rifle down, and followed him. Her boots crunched through the sand, her heartbeat matching the rhythm. She hadn't been called to command during training hours before. Something had changed. When she stepped inside, the tone of the room told her everything. The lights were dimmed, the atmosphere tight. Bridger stood beside a holomap projected across the table. Kensington was there too, his usual calm replaced with something sharper, concern masked as professionalism. "Close the door," Bridger said. She did. He motioned toward the map. "Convoy Bravo 6, humanitarian escort through the southern corridor. 3 hours ago they went dark." Frowned, "Comms failure." "Not this time," Kensington said. "Satellite shows 2 vehicles destroyed, 1 immobilized. Unknown hostiles in the area, possibly remnants of the insurgent cell we hit last quarter." "How many survivors?" she asked. "Maybe a handful," Bridger replied. "But the team pinned down includes one of ours, Master Chief. He was there as range oversight for weapons transport." The room went still. "He's alive?" she asked quietly. "Last signal came 15 minutes ago," Kensington said. "He triggered an emergency beacon before comms cut. Intel suggests the enemy has heavier weapons now, possibly anti-material rifles. If that's true, rescue has to be surgical, fast, quiet." Her stomach tightened. "You want me to lead it?" Bridger didn't answer immediately. "Command authorized a small extraction unit. I need a shooter with your range discipline. You'd have overwatch from the ridge line, no more than a 2-click approach." Exhaled slowly. "You have active operators for that." "They're hours away," he said. "We don't have hours." She looked at the map again, desert ridges, crosswinds, open exposure. Every inch of it was dangerous. Every inch reminded her of Helmand. "I thought my time behind the scope was done," she said softly. Bridger met her eyes. "So did I, but you taught these recruits what calm under pressure looks like. Now I need you to show them why." She hesitated, not from fear, but from something deeper. That quiet voice that had been whispering for months, "Don't go back." But the idea of the old Master Chief who'd believed in her, when no one else did, trapped and outnumbered. She nodded once. "I'll gear up." The desert wind had turned cold by the time the transport rolled out. 3 vehicles, stripped, fast, minimal noise profile, sat behind the wheel of the lead, and Blackwood handled navigation and comms. Sat in the back, assembling her like a surgeon preparing for operation. Each click of metal echoed inside the armored cabin. Watched her through the rear mirror. "I thought you said you were done with this." She didn't look up. "I did." "Then why go?" She locked the bolt, chambered around, and finally met his gaze in the mirror. "Because someone else didn't get the chance to come back last time." That ended the conversation. The sun was sinking by the time they reached the ridge line. Below them stretched a broken expanse of rock and dust. Smoke trailed faintly from the valley floor, black scars against the orange sky. Through binoculars, could see the convoy remains. 2 burning trucks, 1 overturned vehicle, and movement among the debris. 4 hostiles, she murmured. No, 5. Heavy weapons set up on the northern flank. Survivors holed up behind the armored carrier. Visual on, Bridger's voice came through comms. Not yet, but I see a wounded figure near the carrier door. Could be him. Bridger's tone hardened. You're clear to engage if they close distance. Adjusted her scope, breathing steady. The world compressed again, just wind, glass, and heartbeat. Range, asked softly. 1,800 meters. You sure that's? Quiet, she said. The first hostile stepped into view, rifle raised toward the carrier. Her finger tightened, not with tension but inevitability. The shot cracked across the desert like thunder rolling through eternity. The man dropped before the sound reached him. Another stepped forward, panicked. She cycled the bolt, fired again. Down. The third dove for cover, too late. Whispered almost reverently, she's painting ghosts. Didn't hear him. Her world was mathematics and rhythm again. The part of her she'd buried was wide awake now, precise, detached, cold. Then she saw movement near the wounded figure. Dragging himself behind cover, blood staining his sleeve. 2 more hostiles closing in. She adjusted half a mil, exhaled slowly. 1 breath, 1 life. The first dropped. The second kept running, desperate, erratic. She followed him through the scope, waited. Pulled. Silence. Minutes stretched into hours. By the time the extraction team reached the convoy, the sun had vanished behind the ridge. Area secure, his voice said over comms. We've got, he's hurt but stable. Exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. When she descended from the ridge, the scene below hit her harder than she expected. Smoke, blood, sand, and lying on a stretcher, smiling weakly. Told you, he rasped. You can't hide talent forever. She knelt beside him, helmet under her arm. You shouldn't have been here. He chuckled, coughing through pain. Neither should you, but I'm glad you were. Medics loaded him into the vehicle. As they pulled away, she stood alone for a moment, looking out over the field at what she'd done, what she'd stopped, and what she'd just woken inside herself again. Back at base, the night was restless. Bridger found her sitting outside the barracks, staring into the dark. You did good out there, he said quietly. Did I? She asked. You saved lives. She looked up at him, eyes shadowed. That's what I told myself last time, too. He didn't push further, just stood beside her, silent. The kind of silence soldiers understand, the one that says I get it without needing words. Finally, she said, when I pulled that trigger it didn't feel like duty. It felt like memory. Bridger nodded. And did memory help you aim? Yes, she whispered, but it also reminded me why I stopped. He sighed. You can't undo who you are, but you can choose what it means now. She turned toward him, the faintest flicker of something human breaking through her calm. And what if what I am is the thing I swore I'd never be again? Then you make peace with her, Bridger said softly. The sniper and the teacher, they're not enemies. They're both trying to protect something. She didn't answer. The night wind carried the smell of dust and smoke, the scent of survival. 2 days later was recovering in medical. The recruits lined up outside his ward, eager to see the man they thought untouchable. But when entered, he waved them away. Close the door, he said. She did. You saved my life, he said simply. So I'm told. He smiled faintly. You don't look proud. I'm not, she admitted. I'm conflicted. He nodded slowly. Because you went back to who you were. Yes. And you think that's wrong. She didn't answer. Reached for her wrist, weak but steady. Listen to me. You didn't become that sniper again. You became the one who chose to save lives. There's a difference. Intent is what separates killers from protectors. She met his eyes, the old soldiers, the ones that had seen just as much loss. You really believe that? I have to, he said, or I can't sleep at night. For the first time in days, she almost smiled. The following week, the base returned to routine as much as it ever could. But something had changed in the way people looked at her. It wasn't fear anymore. It was reverence. Salute was sharp now. Blackwood's respect was open. Even the rookies whispered quieter when she passed. She didn't enjoy it, but she accepted it. Not as praise, as acknowledgement. During evening drills, she stood behind the firing line, watching them shoot. Each trigger pull echoed like memory. Remember, she told them, this weapon doesn't make you powerful, it makes you responsible. They nodded, serious, focused. Bridger, watching from the sidelines, leaned toward Kensington. You see that? See what, sir? She's not teaching them how to kill, Bridger said. She's teaching them how to carry the weight of it. That night, alone in her quarters, unpacked the photograph again. Her old team, 5 faces, 2 gone. She traced the image of her spotter's grin with her thumb. We did good today, she whispered. And for the first time, it didn't sound like guilt. The wind outside howled softly, carrying sand against the glass. Somewhere out there, the desert slept. The ghosts were quieter now. She set the photograph down, turned off the light, and sat in the dark for a long moment, breathing, steady, alive. Sometimes, redemption doesn't arrive in applause. Sometimes it comes in silence. In the moment you aim, fire, and realize you no longer need to prove that you can. Why do secrets never stay buried, even when the people keeping them wish they would? It started small. A whisper here, a headline there. Then it spread like wildfire through the wind. Unidentified sniper saves U.S. convoy, 2.5-kilometer precision strike. Hero with no name, base insider claims record-shattering shot. The story had escaped. Not from command, not from official channels. Someone on the ground, a contractor, a comms tech, maybe even a recruit, had leaked enough details for the world to notice. By morning, the phones in Bridger's office wouldn't stop ringing. He stood by the window, jaw tight, while Kensington spoke in clipped tones to command. Yes, sir, we're managing containment. No, the operative's name has not been released. Understood. When he hung up, Bridger didn't move. He just asked how bad. Kensington exhaled. Viral bad. Major outlets picked it up. Everyone wants to know who pulled the trigger. Bridger's gaze darkened. And they will if someone connects the dots. They're already trying, Kensington said. Satellite captures of the area, personnel rosters. Someone will match timestamps. Bridger turned away, rubbing his temples. Find out who leaked it, quietly. Found out before they told her. She walked into the mess hall mid-lunch and felt it instantly, the shift. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. And the silence that followed wasn't contempt anymore. It was awe mixed with curiosity. She didn't need to ask what they'd seen. The above-the-counter answered for her, a blurred image of desert wreckage, a rifle silhouetted against the horizon, and the headline running beneath it. Unknown female shooter executes impossible long-range rescue shot. She froze, tray in hand, and looked up from their table, guilt flashing across their faces. Ma'am, said quietly, standing, we didn't. I know, she said, voice low, sit down. She walked past them without another word. In Bridger's office, the tension was electric. She stood at attention while the captain paced, the report tablet glowing in his hand. You realize what this means, he said. They're going to dig until they find a name. And when they do, every classified operation you ever took part in is at risk. His tone was calm. Then I'll deny it. They won't believe denial, Kensington said. They'll want interviews, debriefs, photos. They'll want the face of the 5,000-meter legend. Her jaw tightened. That legend isn't mine, it's theirs. Bridger stopped packing. It's about to be yours whether you want it or not. She looked up at him, eyes steady. Then let them have their myth, but not the truth. That night she sat outside her quarters again. The bass had quieted, but she could still feel it, that shift in how people saw her. Not as a soldier, as a story. The same thing had happened once before, after Helmand. The difference then was that no one was supposed to know. Now everyone wanted to. She stared at her hands, the same ones that had pulled the trigger, the same ones that had held dying friends, the same ones now holding the weight of attention she never asked for. Heroes, she muttered softly, almost laughing. People always want heroes. They never ask what it costs to make one. The voice that answered her came from the shadows. Maybe it's time someone told them. She turned. Bridger was standing there, hands in his pockets. "You think I should speak?" she asked. "I think silence has its limits," he said. "And the world's going to write your story either way. Wouldn't you rather they get it right?" She looked away, toward the horizon. "Getting it right means reopening wounds I buried years ago." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but it also means those wounds start meaning something." 2 days later, the order came down from command. Subject authorized for controlled media engagement. Interview to be supervised. All classified details remain sealed. It wasn't a request, it was a directive. The journalist arrived with practiced charm and careful eyes. She introduced herself as war correspondent for GlobalNet. Her handshake was firm, her smile professional. "I want you to know," she said too, "I'm not here to sensationalize you. I just want people to understand what you did." Studied her quietly. "What I did was my job." That's exactly what I want them to hear. The room they used was bare, white walls, one camera, one microphone. No glamour, no lights. Bridger stood off to the side, arms crossed. Command representatives monitored remotely. Started gently. "Corporal, can you describe the moment you made the shot?" Paused, considering her words carefully. It wasn't a moment, it was math. Wind, temperature, distance. You don't make shots like that, you solve them. "Still," said softly, "people are calling it the longest confirmed rescue shot in history." Looked at her, expression unreadable. "They're calling it that because they want it to mean something. But it doesn't. It's not a miracle, it's physics guided by circumstance." Hesitated. "Then what does it mean to you?" For the first time, his voice softened. "It means I didn't have to attend another funeral." There was silence in the room after that. Real silence, the kind that carries truth in it. The interview aired that weekend. No hero music, no dramatization. Just her voice, calm, measured, almost haunting. People think pulling a trigger is about confidence. It is. It's about control. Every bullet leaves a mark, not just on a target, but on the person who fired it. "I didn't become a legend. I became a warning." It went viral within hours. Not because it glorified her, because it didn't. Viewers called it the most honest military testimony in years. Others called it the death of the Hollywood soldier myth. For it was just another scar, but at least this one she chose. The attention changed everything. Command wanted to leverage the fame. Public relations wanted her on panels, in documentaries, at recruitment events. She refused all of it. "I'm not a symbol," she told Bridger. "I'm a soldier." "You're both now," he said. "And whether you like it or not, you represent every quiet professional who never got the credit." "That's exactly why I don't want it," she said. "They deserve their peace." He studied her for a long moment. "Then what do you want?" Her answer came slowly. "To make sure the next one like me never has to choose between silence and the truth." Weeks passed. The world moved on, as it always does. Another story replaced hers on the headlines. But inside the base, something different lingered. Her words had sunk deep. Now ran his team with quiet precision instead of arrogance. led drills with more empathy than bravado. Even the new recruits carried themselves differently, more thoughtful, more aware of what duty really meant. And through it all continued her quiet teaching, not just of marksmanship, but of restraint, discipline, and reflection. Her lectures became less about shots fired and more about decisions not made. "You'll never regret the bullet you didn't need to fire," she told them one afternoon, standing before the range as the sun sank low. "Control isn't weakness, it's mastery." They listened, silent, the way soldiers do when something feels like truth. That evening she found Bridger in the hangar bay, checking manifests. "Got a minute?" she asked. He nodded, setting the clipboard aside. "What's on your mind?" She held up a command's latest orders. Transfer request approved. Instructional duty at Officer Candidate Marksmanship Program. Bridger raised an eyebrow. "That's a big move." "I'm not needed here anymore," she said. "They've learned what they needed." He smiled faintly. "You think teaching's a temporary post, don't you?" She hesitated. "I think teaching is how I stop running." He nodded once, understanding more than he said. "Then it's a good move. Could use someone who still remembers what the job costs." She gave a small, genuine smile. "Thank you, sir, for seeing me before anyone else did." Bridger's reply was quiet. "You were never invisible, you just didn't want to be seen." When she boarded the transport that week, the base assembled to see her off, recruits, instructors, even on crutches. He saluted her with a grin. "Don't teach them too well or I'll be out of a job." She returned the salute. "You're irreplaceable, Master Chief." He laughed softly. "You say that to all the half-dead men you drag out of firefights." She smiled, a real one this time. "Only the ones who owe me coffee." Stepped forward, serious now. "Corporal, thank you for everything." Nodded. "Earn it every day." When the engines roared to life and the ramp began to close, she took one last look at the horizon, the desert that had been her crucible, her redemption, her silence. The wind whipped across her face, warm and alive. She didn't salute, didn't wave, just watched until the world blurred, then turned away. At 30,000 feet, alone in the cabin, she closed her eyes. The hum of the aircraft was soft, steady. She thought about every mile she'd walked to get here, every secret, every ghost, every trigger pull that had taught her something about what it means to live with what you've done. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the old photograph, the one of her and her spotter. She smiled faintly, whispering, "Still watching, huh?" The cabin lights dimmed. The stars outside glowed faint and endless. Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from finally being seen, not as a weapon, not as a myth, but as a human who never stopped aiming for something better. Why did feel colder than the desert, even under the summer sun? The wind here smelled different, wet pine, salt air, concrete dust, but could still feel the ghost of sand beneath her boots. Every sound echoed sharper. Every student stood. This was no outpost. This was the crucible. Wasn't about learning to shoot. It was about learning to become. "Welcome, class," said the instructor beside her, a broad-shouldered Marine named Daniels. "This is your range master, Corporal, newly transferred from the Western Academy." 50 candidates stood at attention. They were younger than she expected, faces still too clean, eyes still too eager. Some recognized her immediately. Others only knew the myth. Stepped forward, her presence quiet but absolute. "I don't care what you've heard," she said. "You're not here to become snipers. You're here to understand consequence." That silenced the murmurs. She let it sink in. When you pull the trigger, someone's story ends. Maybe an enemy, maybe a friend. The bullet doesn't know the difference. You do, and that difference is what keeps you human. Her voice was calm, steady as a heartbeat, cold as a mirror. Daniels glanced at her, then back at the recruits. "She's not exaggerating. Listen close. You won't get this kind of truth in the manuals." The next weeks passed in rhythm. Range drills, theory, observation, deconstruction. But lessons weren't just about marksmanship. She'd stand behind them, eyes sharp, correcting posture, grip, focus. "Your stance tells me your story," she'd say. "If you're scared, the rifle knows. If you're proud, it'll punish you. Be honest with your weapon. It's the only thing that'll tell you the truth back." The candidates learned to stop chasing perfection. They learned to breathe with the wind. But there was one, a young woman named Myra Collins, who stood out. Not because she was the best, but because she tried too hard. Noticed it immediately. The way she clenched her jaw before every shot. The way frustration shadowed her face when she missed by inches. After one late session, when the range emptied and dusk settled in, approached her quietly. "Still here?" Myra jumped slightly. "Ma'am, just trying to get the zero right." "You've been trying for an hour," said. "Maybe that's not the problem." Myra sighed. "I just can't get it perfect." Studied her, recognizing something painfully familiar. "Who told you it has to be?" "My father," she said softly. "He served, recon. He used to say precision is honor." Nodded slowly. "And what did he say about missing?" Myra hesitated. "He didn't." Crouched beside her rifle, scanning the grouping on the target downrange, tight, centered, and still, somehow unsatisfying. "You're not fighting the wind," said gently. "You're fighting his ghost." Myra's breath caught. "How do you stop?" "You don't," said quietly. "You learn to aim beside it." That night stayed on the range long after the others left. The field lights hummed softly overhead. The target stood still, distant, waiting. She lay prone, the beside her, untouched for weeks. The weapon gleamed faintly in the floodlight, a reminder and a question. How do you teach peace with something built for war? She looked through the scope, the world shrinking again into one line of sight. For a moment, the past flickered there, sand, smoke, a voice calling out coordinates that would never come again. Her hands trembled. She closed her eyes. "You're still here," she whispered into the wind. "Still watching, aren't you?" She fired one round, not at a target, but into the empty field beyond. No reason, no result, just release. The echo rolled across the valley like a sigh. The next morning she was back to work, calm, unreadable, but something had changed in her tone. When a candidate asked, "What's the longest shot you've ever taken?" she didn't deflect like before. She simply said, "Long enough to wish I hadn't." They didn't ask again. Still, word spread, quietly, respectfully. Recruits whispered that she'd been the one, the ghost sniper, the 5,000-meter legend who saved a convoy in the desert. Some said she had. Some said she didn't need to. Weeks later, command sent new orders. Instructors were to prepare for a high-level evaluation. Observers from D.C. would attend. Among them, journalists, congressional aides, and senior officers. A public relations gesture disguised as training oversight. Hated it immediately. "Public eyes on the range," Daniels muttered, reading the memo. "They want a show." "They'll get a class," replied coolly. "Nothing more." The day came bright and merciless. The candidates lined up in the morning light, the press seated quietly behind glass partitions. Cameras, notepads, the smell of staged approval. Stood before her team, composed as always. "Today is not about impressing them," she said. "It's about proving to yourselves that calm beats noise." Then she nodded to Myra, "Your lead shooter." The young woman's eyes widened. "Ma'am." "You're ready." The others took their positions. Wind flags danced faintly along the field. "Target 1,200 meters," said. "Crosswind 5 knots east to west. You know the math. Trust your training." Myra lay prone, breath shaking slightly. Crouched beside her. "What did I tell you about ghosts?" "Don't fight them," Myra whispered. "Aim beside them." "Good." She fired. The round hit dead center. The sound of applause rose behind the glass, polite, controlled. But inside the range it was electric. Smiled faintly, again. Myra fired 3 more, perfect grouping. Even Daniels, the seasoned Marine beside her, looked impressed. "She's the real deal," he said under his breath. "Not yet," murmured, "but she will be." After the demonstration, the evaluators filed out with their data tablets and hollow praise. Didn't stay to hear it. She walked back to the lockers, sat down, and let the quiet wrap around her. She wasn't proud, she was relieved. Because for once, someone else's aim had hit what she'd missed her whole life, peace with imperfection. That evening, Daniels found her sitting on the range steps, staring into twilight. "Hell of a class today," he said. She nodded. "They did well." He hesitated. "You ever going to tell me what really happened out there, the 5,000-meter story?" She smiled faintly. "What do you think happened?" "I think a woman took a shot the world said was impossible," he said, "and then spent the rest of her life wishing she hadn't needed to." Looked at him for a long time. "That's close enough." He nodded, "Figured." They sat in silence, watching the last light fade behind the tree line. After a while he said, "You know, you've changed this place. You didn't just teach them to shoot, you taught them to listen." She glanced at him. "You think that matters?" "I think it's the only thing that does," he said. She smiled softly, a rare, honest smile. "Then maybe I finally hit something that matters." 2 months later, Command sent another memo, commendations for instructional excellence, program retention at record levels. Her name was on the top. She didn't attend the ceremony. Instead, she walked the range alone at sunset, the air cool and still. She carried her old rifle with her, the one from Helmand. The barrel, the finish, faded. She knelt, placed it gently into the sand, and whispered, "You've done enough." Then she stood, watching as the wind began to cover it with dust. No salutes, no speeches, just the sound of the wind doing what time always does, bury what no longer needs to be carried. That night Myra knocked softly at her door. "Come in," said. The young cadet entered, holding a small photo the class taken that morning. "Thought you might want a copy." Looked at it, the faces, the smiles, the sense of quiet pride. She took it gently. "Thank you." Myra hesitated, then said, "Ma'am, are you happy now?" Looked at her, really looked, at the innocence still surviving in her eyes. "I think," she said softly, "I'm learning how." Myra smiled. "Then I'll keep aiming for that too." When she left, sat alone again, the photograph in her hands, the night humming outside. She looked out the window, toward the range lights flickering in the dark. For once, the ghosts didn't feel so close. They were further away now, still there, still part of her, but quieter. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. Why does peace always arrive disguised as a choice? The call came at dawn, soft static, a coded channel she hadn't heard in years. "Corporal, this is Command. Authorization level Delta 3. Please confirm identity." She froze, coffee halfway to her lips. The voice was calm, official, and cold. The kind of voice that always came before something she'd sworn never to do again. "This is," she said quietly. "Identity confirmed. Go ahead." "Corporal, we need an advisor for a precision overwatch detail. Remote operations, Eastern European theater. Non-combat. Training oversight only." She didn't answer, not right away. The silence on the line stretched. Finally she said, "Why me?" "You know why," the voice replied. "There's no one better at reading distance and calm." Her stomach tightened. "I'm not that person anymore." The voice paused. "No one's asking you to be. We're asking you to help someone else who might become her." Then the line went dead. By noon, Bridger was already waiting for her in the base director's office. He looked older now, more silver in his hair, same hard eyes. "So they called you," he said. "They did." And she looked at him steadily, and I don't know. He nodded, leaning back in his chair. You've built a good life here, teaching, mentoring, you don't owe them anything. I know. But, she exhaled slowly. There's a new team deploying, young, green, they'll need someone who's seen the cost of precision. He studied her for a long moment. You're not going for them, you're going for yourself. Maybe, she admitted. Or maybe I just need to see if I can stand on that soil again without breaking. He gave a small, sad smile. Then go, but promise me one thing. What's that? Don't disappear again. 3 weeks later, she was on a transport bound east. The world beneath her had changed, greener, colder, sharper. Not a desert this time, rolling plains, forest, the ghosts of new wars being born. The forward base sat tucked between hills, a temporary world of mud and tension. The unit she'd come to advise was young, 20 soldiers, barely tested. Their commanding officer, Major Lutz, greeted her with the stiffness of someone not sure how to salute a legend. Corporal, he said, it's an honor. Just, she corrected gently, I'm here to help, not to haunt. He smiled awkwardly, understood. She scanned the camp, the new generation of eyes, eager but uncertain. The smell of diesel and rain, the hum of drones overhead. Different war, same nerves. They led her to the range, muddy, makeshift but functional. 3 candidates were already waiting. Among them, a young woman adjusting her rifle with hands that shook too much. Noticed immediately, what's her name? Second Lieutenant, Lutz said. Best we've got, but she freezes under live fire pressure. Watched her through the rain, the tight shoulders, the tremor in her breath. She's not freezing, said quietly. She's remembering. Remembering what? The possibility of failing someone who won't get back up. By afternoon, was back in her element. Rain fell steady, rhythmic, washing the field into shades of gray. She moved between shooters, adjusting posture, murmuring corrections. Lower your elbow. Feel the weight, don't fight it. Let the wind talk, you're just listening. When she reached, the younger woman looked up nervously. Ma'am, they told me about you, about the 5,000-meter shot. Knelt beside her. They always tell that story wrong. Blinked wrong. Nodded. They think it was about distance. It was. It was about knowing the shot would change everything and doing it anyway. The younger woman swallowed. Were you afraid? Terrified, said simply, but I learned something that day. What? That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to aim while it's shaking. His eyes flickered, the words landing like truth she'd been waiting to hear. Now breathe, said softly. Let the fear stay, then pull. The rifle cracked. The round hit perfect center. Exhaled, half relief, half disbelief. Smiled faintly. There you go, that's what control looks like. Over the next week, her presence reshaped the unit. She didn't lecture, she didn't boast. She just existed, a quiet constant that made others steady themselves. Her lessons were different here, softer, heavier. You'll be told you're heroes, she said one evening as they cleaned rifles under the dim tent lights. But heroes don't sleep better, they just stop running from the noise. She paused, eyes distant. Don't chase records, chase precision. And remember, the hardest part of any shot isn't distance, it's forgiveness. The younger soldiers sat in silence. The kind that meant understanding had settled deep. Then came the night, everything tested her again. An alert blared through the base, perimeter sensors tripped, possible hostile scout units approaching from the North Ridge. The rain hadn't stopped. Visibility, poor. Wind, brutal. Grabbed her gear without hesitation. Lutz met her at the command tent. They're closing fast, if they get close enough to see our position. They won't, said, scanning the map. Get to the North Ridge with her team, she's ready. Lutz hesitated. You think she can handle live fire? She can if she remembers what she learned. She turned, grabbed her spotting gear, and followed them into the storm. The ridge was slick with mud, the world blurred by rain. Lightning flashed in the distance, carving silhouettes against the horizon. And two others set up overwatch, shaking but steady. Targets at 900 meters called, voice calm over comms. Wind 12 knots east, adjust 2 clicks right. His breathing was ragged. I can't, the scope's fogging. Then trust your instinct, said. You know where they are. The next flash of lightning illuminated the figures advancing through the trees, faint, fast-moving shadows. Hesitated. Saw it, the paralysis, the fear of pulling wrong, of taking a life she couldn't return. Said, voice soft but firm, this isn't about killing, it's about protecting what's behind you. Steadied, her finger tightened, the shot cracked. The lead target dropped instantly, the others scattered. Again, commanded. 2 more flashes, 2 more hits. And then silence, just rain, wind, and the slow rhythm of her heartbeat. Looked over, breathing hard. Did I do it? Smiled faintly. You did what you had to, that's enough. By morning, the threat was gone. The ridge was quiet again, washed clean by rain and thunder. Approached her as the sun broke through gray clouds. Ma'am, thank you for trusting me. Looked at her, at the steady eyes, the posture no longer trembling. Don't thank me. Thank the version of yourself that didn't run. The younger woman nodded. I won't forget that. Good, said softly, because one day you'll be the one saying it to someone else. 2 weeks later, the mission ended. She returned to the States quietly, as she'd always done, no parades, no cameras, no speeches. At the range was just as she'd left it. The pine trees, the hum of wind, the smell of oil and brass. Her home, her peace. Daniels met her at the gate. Heard you were back, how was it? Wet, she said with a faint smile, but worth it. He studied her expression. Did you find what you were looking for? She took a long breath, watching cadets shoot in the distance. Maybe it's not about finding. Maybe it's about accepting that you already did. He nodded slowly. You ever gonna write it down, everything that happened? No, she said quietly. Some stories aren't meant to be told, just remembered. That evening, as the sun sank over the range, she walked the perimeter alone. The world was gold again, quiet, calm, alive. In her hand, she held the same photograph. The edges were frayed now, the image faded, but it didn't hurt to look at it anymore. She traced her old spotter's face with her thumb and whispered, You can rest now. She tucked it into her jacket and looked out at the horizon. The sound of rifles echoed faintly behind her, the next generation learning what she'd spent a lifetime trying to teach. And for the first time, she didn't flinch at the sound. It wasn't noise anymore. It was legacy. When night fell, she stood at the edge of the range, eyes on the stars. The wind moved gently through the trees, not the cruel wind of deserts but the soft kind that sounds like breathing. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Sometimes peace isn't the absence of conflict, she said. It's the moment you stop needing a target to feel alive. She turned, walking slowly back toward the glow of the barracks lights, her silhouette fading into the quiet. Behind her, the world kept breathing, calm, vast, unbroken. And for the first time in years, she felt no need to look back. Because some stories don't end with the echo of a gunshot. They end with the sound of someone finally putting the rifle down and walking away whole.